Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. Thank you. Please stand by. If you are the chairperson, press the star key now. Your conference will begin when the chairperson arrives. Please wait. chairperson has not yet arrived, please try your call again later. Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Thank you. Please stand by. If you are the chairperson, press the star key now. Your conference will begin when the chairperson arrives. You will now be placed into conference. There are 16 participants in the conference.
Marijuana Control Board. I'm Mark Springer, the chairman. We are meeting on the homeland of the Tlingit people, and I think it's appropriate that we're meeting in the hall named after that great civil rights leader, Elizabeth Pratovich. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Good morning. Lauren Jones?
Here.
Mark Springer?
Here.
Nicholas Miller?
Here.
Christopher Heine?
Here.
Bruce Schulte?
Here.
Also present is Interim Director Glenn Klinkart, Terry Craig, Joan Wilson, Assistant Attorney General, and I believe on the phone should be James Holscher, Chief Investigator.
They're talking now. I don't know if you want to listen or not.
Good morning. Lauren Jones? Here. Mark Springer? Here.
Okay, folks, you want to mute your phones out there in radio land, please. Okay, we have a quorum. All members are present. I neglected to mention for the record that we're in the 3rd Judicial District. Well, oh, this was an error?
Yeah, that's...
Okay, well, I stand corrected. We're in the 2nd Judicial District. And we're what? What judicial district are we in? Yeah, okay, all right. Well, we're going backwards. I know we're not in the 4th.
We're not in the 3rd, I know.
Okay, we're in the 1st Judicial District as we are required by statute to meet in each judicial district each year. Okay, with that, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I would like to propose a slight change to the agenda.
Sure.
I would like to propose that we move the election of officers to the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay, is there a second to that motion to amend the agenda?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Mr. Schulte. Are there any other changes, amendments to the agenda? Yeah, Ms. Wilson. Actually, yeah, we are gonna have a couple of executive sessions, and we will be the first one will be on top shelf herbs, and the second one we will have with the director discussing Common Collective. And at some point, perhaps prior to that, could we have you go over the Office of Administrative Hearings process for us? So let's do that after the legislation update and before the executive session. Is that okay with everybody? All right. All right. Any other changes? Not hearing any. All those in favor of the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we've got an agenda. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the November 13th, 15th, 2019 meeting?
Move to approve.
Okay, Mr. Schulte moves to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Mr. Jaime. Is there any changes to the minutes? Okay, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of the November 13th, 15th meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next item is board governance, which is where we fess up whether there's any change in our status that affects our membership on the board, and there may also be another point or two raised. So, Mr. Jones?
No change.
Mr. Schulte?
No change.
Mr. Jaime?
No change.
Mr. Miller?
No change.
And I'm still just me, so I think, Mr. Miller, you had something you wanted to bring up during board governance?
I did. I actually. Awesome. Now I have two. So I wanted to get some clarification on when we do and don't take public comment. During the general public comment in the beginning, I know we don't take comment on things that are on the agenda, but when that item comes up on the agenda, we also don't take public comment unless it's a new license. Like for the reg projects in the past, we've always said that we can't take public comment. Is that accurate, or can we change that?
No. And I'll add that the advice that we received previously was that it was, I don't think the word inappropriate was used, but our practice has been from the beginning that we would not take comment about items that were on an agenda. Although, as Mr. Miller correctly points out, if we have an objection to a license application or to a renewal, then we would recognize the objector to weigh in. So is that a APA issue? How do other boards do it?
That's a really interesting question. I can tell you from other boards I've represented, one board is here, we do take public comment when, for example, a loan application is up. I'm looking at the Board of Agriculture and Conservation. I think the most important thing when you develop your policies, and you've developed it currently to do this, which is what your concern is due process. You don't want anyone to get an extra bite of the apple, so to speak. But if what you do then is change your procedure to say we're going to allow public comment on matters before that, make sure both parties have that option. I would recommend that we not change the procedure for this meeting, and then give me the opportunity to, if this is a direction you want to go, give me the opportunity to talk to other attorney generals and to look at other boards and get you better direction on that. But what I see as the issue is we want everybody to have the ability to express an opinion on an issue. Okay.
I do have a motion, but I will wait until we get clarification.
Thank you, sir.
And like I said, the public comment and the due process is the important part.
Right.
And this came up kind of particularly, at least, addressed to me on the on-site consumption issue. There was some concern, some parties that they didn't think they were getting an opportunity apart from comment to testify. So, okay, well, thank you.
And, Mr. Chair, you can just have a separate hearing to get public comment on big issues
and
like
we've
that.
done that.
All right.
Yes. Okay, public testimony. Anything that's not on the agenda? Mr. Emmett, good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Mr. Director, members of the board. All right, I'm Brandon Emmett, and I am representing the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association. I'd like to read a statement into the record. First and foremost, the membership and board of the directors of the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association would like to thank Marijuana Control Board Chair Mark Springer for his near 5 years of service and for his efforts to work towards solutions for the industry. On a personal note, Mark, you and I got to work together for quite a long time. I'm honored to call you a friend. I think that your service on the board has been exemplary, and I hope that whatever you do going forward, that you stay engaged in the public process. So, thank you. Okay, so going forward, we want to remind the board and AMCO that the most efficient and constructive solutions occur with input from licensees. We would like to take this opportunity to suggest potential solutions to key industry issues. These solutions include reviving working groups and improving communication tools for AMCO. On working groups, we encourage the board and AMCO to continue to have active working groups for issues such as transportation, waste management, metric, and laboratory testing. Working group participants should include topic experts from all sectors, including members of the cannabis industry, to provide unique perspectives on the issue, as well as relevant state agencies such as the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Division of Agriculture. We will be submitting a document today that identifies our highest priority for transportation issues. A document was developed by the AMIA's own Transportation Committee, and suggested changes to regulations include improvements that will greatly enhance employee and public safety. This is an example of our desire to put forward industry-vetted ideas that this board should consider. Because these changes impact safety, we hope addressing these issues will be a high priority for the board. On communication, we continue to advocate that better communication among AMCO, the board, and licensees will benefit the industry as a whole. Posting audio recordings of MCB meetings will allow access to important information on regulation updates and the licensing process. This will lead to more efficiencies and ultimately decrease the workload for licensees, the board, and AMCO staff. With all relevant documents and recordings in an online location, licensees will have more resources to ensure that they're compliant and operating in good faith. This will result in a decrease in phone calls and emails to AMCO and in license application mistakes. Access to up-to-date regulations and interpretations will promote compliance. Better compliance means fewer notices of violation, which is still AMCO's main communication tool with licensees. The advisory notice is a tool that can help define AMCO's expectations for licensees without the weight of a permanent file and a potential hearing. Greater use of the advisory notice will allow AMCO to clarify expectations to all licensees or individual licensees in a constructive and efficient manner. AMI and its members are committed to making the industry more efficient and safer. We would like to thank the board and AMCO for their ongoing efforts to achieve these same goals. We encourage you to use the wealth of knowledge available through collaborative efforts with the AMIA and our membership. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate those kind words. I don't know who's going to have a sore next, the people sitting down there looking at us, or us leaning over to look at you. So, thanks. Any questions for Mr. Emmett? All right, thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, everybody.
Anybody else? Sir, come on up. Introduce yourself to us.
There we go. That better? Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Dave Shady. I'm the director of the Division of Agriculture. So, I'm the gentleman that's in charge of industrial hemp and new regulations we're doing. And so, we're getting closer to the end of that process, and I wanted to come down and give you a little presentation or just a discussion so that you know what we were doing and let you know that a number of things that we're working on. So we're within a short period of time. We've adopted final regulations and they're final review by the division or Department of Law, the regulations section. So when that's done, next step is to enroll, and then 30 days thereafter, we will be able to stand up our industrial hemp program. The point that I really want to make sure that it's clear to the board and everybody else is industrial hemp is now considered an agricultural product. And we still have a lot of misconception that people think that cannabis is cannabis. And in the law, this has been the tricky part of writing regulations, is that Industrial hemp is a highly controlled agricultural product. People either don't understand it's an agricultural product, or they don't understand that it's still highly controlled. I have people tell me, I can just do what I want. No, you can't. You have to be in a USDA program or a state authorized program to use these products. So as we do that, this is going to require the Marijuana Control Board, you folks, and the Division of Ag to make sure we work together, that we're clear in what we do, that we communicate well with each other. There are a lot of really cool things that are going to happen. We have the USDA and the FDA looking at pesticides and different products that are going to be approved for use on industrial hemp. That's the kind of stuff that we're going to see some science and work done that I think is going to help inform us as we all go forward. One of our concerns...
Folks, can you please mute your phones? We got a couple of lines that are open, and we get some feedback.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Interested in, so please mute your phones. Thank you.
So one of the issues that I wanted to bring forward to the board today is that we have worked really hard to use in-state labs. We want to use the in-state labs for our testing. Where you're testing for THC contents high, we're testing for things to make sure it's low. And we've had feedback from the different labs that unless the Marijuana Control Board will approve product that is not part of their chain of custody and already approved, that they're very reluctant to do that. Because industrial hemp is not cannabis under your control, and they don't want to have unauthorized product in their lab. So that is something that I had a chat with your acting director, and we thought that it's time to have that discussion. We want to, over time, make sure that the testing can be done as much as possible in state. We are going to require testing of a lot of constituents that are not required on the recreational side of the industry, but we think that's really going to be important as we go forward to make sure that's done. Just in a synopsis, our regulations are a little unique in that we are going to have 3 sets of classes of registrants. We're going to have growers, which everybody expected to see. I mean, that was pretty much a known. We're going to have people grow. We got a few of those, and we actually have quite a few who want to start that. But as it turned out, as we did the analysis, all parts of the plant are under our jurisdiction, so we're like, well, then we're going to need to deal with manufacturing. So our regulations talk about registering the manufacturing of the industrial hemp into further products and retail sales, because one of my concerns is there's a lot of cannabinoid products out there that we don't know if it's safe. We know it's out on the street. We know that it's there. We don't know if it's got pesticides, heavy metals, those kind of things. And in the lower 48, talking to other programs, there's synthetics and things that we're really worried about as this now legal side of the industry is now going to continue to grow on a national and international basis. So literally, as we've written this regs, the industry has changed as we go. We can't even keep up with the different products that are being developed. And so we literally have tried to draft simple, direct, clear regulations that we can work with all our sister agencies to make sure that everybody stays safe. The safety of the public of using these products has been my paramount concern, because this is a product that the public is not necessarily going to have full informed consent. They're going to assume if it's sold on this Safeway or any other retail store shelf that that it's a safe product. It's a little different when you're going into a facility and you're a consenting adult and you're using a product willingly and knowingly. So there has been a huge difference in the way we've looked at this, and I've approached it, and we've looked at it as an issue to protect the public, but to grow and develop an industry at the same time. So it's been something that we've spent a lot of hours weighing the balances of making sure we have clear expectations of an industry that we know is going to grow, and yet clearly defined all the roles in and out in what products. So with that, just so you know, I was talking on the Hill yesterday. We have a senator that's going to bring forth a bill. We do have some technical amendments to the original Senate Bill 6 that we're going to have to do to get us compliant with the 2018 Farm Bill. So right now our program is operating under the 2014 Farm Bill as a pilot program. with the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, there was a one-year clause phase out of the pilot program. So by October 28th next year, we have to convert our program to a permanent program and get approval of our plan by the USDA. So that discussion we're having, and we're going to work through the legislative process to do that. So with that, I wanted to make sure the board and the staff knows that as you get into agricultural issues, whether it be pesticides or anything else, I have experts on my staff. We are always helpful, ready and willing and available to assist you with that. So with that, I just wanted to introduce myself. People are going to see a lot more of me in public service announcements and my staff, because we're going to let the people know what we're doing, you know, because right now, technically, what's going on is, as I told my boss, it's legal, illegal. I can't grandfather that. We're just going to stand up a program. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Great. Since you're talking about hemp, we'll give you a pass on putting a couple of quarters in the pun pot. So are you envisioning the majority of hemp production would be going to CBD production, or do you think there'll be just industrial, fiber production as well?
I am aware of a number of manufacturers that want to further process, CBD being one example of that. I am aware of bioremediation folks that want to use it. I'm aware of fiber and clothing. I'm aware of the intriguing interest in the industrial hemp for the pseudoplastics industry.
Sure. So
it's
principally the consumptive product would be CBD.
That is
unless somebody's
there's so many cannabinoid products that are coming. CBD is only one of many we're aware of. Yeah. So yes, for animal and human consumption. That's what people don't understand. There's going to be a huge industry for animals. So any of your pet foods, right? So people don't realize one of the things we're dealing with is all the pet food issues that we also got to deal with. So it broadens the scope of what we're doing significantly.
Okay. On testing, now I think that in the past we have said that laboratories have to comply with their regulations if they are testing commercial marijuana, but if I was a home grower and I wanted to see just how good or how bad my home grow product was, that I could take it to a testing laboratory, have them tested, it would stay out of metric. And I think we've had this discussion a couple of times over, the last 5 years. So, but clearly, if the labs that you've spoken to are concerned, I'd say it would be appropriate to come back soon, maybe talk to them, come back soon and see what would work where we could, where the board could shoehorn that in there, or maybe there could just be a regulatory statement that says that, laboratories may test anything, right? Marijuana, hemp, cottonseed, without it having to be in metric and without it being under the jurisdiction of this board unless there's a violation of this board's regulations. So I think that's probably some work that should be done. Yeah, Mr. Schulte.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Couple of thoughts. First of all, Mr. Shades, welcome to the party.
Thank you.
It occurs to me there, question for you first.
Sure.
How extensive do you think the current, I was going to say our labs, but the current marijuana testing labs, how extensive do you think will be their involvement in this new industry, in the hemp industry? I mean, are they going to test every crop? Are they going to do representative samples once a quarter? Do you have any thoughts on how that would look?
Since the regulations are not final, I don't really want to get into a whole lot of detail, but each batch is, each major batch of the constituent has to be tested so that we have a chain of custody. So our kind of view of the world is we want to catch the problems early and not have it go through the retail chain. So pretty much anything coming in a product is going to have to tested for the major constituents so that they can label. We have pretty good labeling requirements about what is or is not in that bottle. And so it's going to require an extensive amount of testing. I frankly don't think we have the capacity in state as we start up, but I want to make sure that develops over time.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Shady, perhaps you can address the reconditioning option if it's between 0.1 and 0.3.
Sure. So one of the, and I told Senator Hughes yesterday, she did a great job on the bill, because one of the few states that allows a little wiggle room, if you want to call it that. So under federal law, 0.3 THC and lower is industrial hemp. So in California, some guy, they don't even tell him what it is. They just went out and plowed his field under. He was 0.4 or whatever. I mean, that was, I thought, pretty bad. Our legislature said if it's 1% or under, and the grower or the manufacturer can condition. So if you can basically mix it with a lower batch, get that total batch below 0.3, then we'll allow you to move forward. So because plants vary and environment varies in that realm, so we will have approved lists of varieties that we know, generally speaking, are going to be accepted. We're going to have some that we know are not going to meet the mark and they'll be prohibited. But as we stand this program up, we're going to have some that come in year after year at 0.2, 0.25. We have a drought. We have something hits that plant, it goes to 0.31. We wanted the ability to give industry some working room to stay within the intent of the law, which is to remove that. And so we've, as Attorney General Wilson has said, we spent a lot of hours trying to figure out how to keep the balance and keeping us compliance with the federal program, but allowing our producers to have the advantage to develop the industry. So I told Senator Hughes that was a great move. And the other thing that I really like in Alaska is all testing goes back to the producer, goes back to the manufacturer. It's an open process within the system so that everybody knows. You know, we're looking at the heavy metals, we're looking at the pesticides, we're looking at those so everybody knows what it is. So does that answer your question?
Well, actually, I have a follow-up, if I may. It does. Thank you. Through this discussion, it occurs to me there's some opportunities here. I mean, first of all, an opportunity to help Mr. Shady and his program get up and running. The other is for the testing labs to expand their clientele and be a little bit more profitable. I think that's a tremendous opportunity. And I'm looking at Mr. Miller and Mr. Emmett here on this next one. I'm assuming that potentially some of the current processors on the marijuana side could be purchasers of some of the bulk product and producers of CBD products. I mean, is that?
I assume everyone will.
So
I mean, it literally because one of the interesting parts, the way we've set the program up is that FDA has jurisdiction over products when it crosses state lines. But if we stand up a program and that's produced in this state, they don't have the jurisdiction. So you're now working with the state agencies. So it's a huge advantage to our industry if we can develop a basically in-state industry as we go forward. So I think we get calls every day from the growers, the manufacturers, retail sales going, when you going, when you going, when you stand it up? Because now we take what folks are doing, they're a little worried about looking over their shoulder in the door, and we make it, they're registered, they're legal, and that's part of a good, safe product. So I suspect, and I don't know any of the manufacturers, but from the phone calls and what my staff says, that's going to be a secondary line for almost everybody to get into.
Mr. Chairman, just I'll wrap it up here. Several of them are in this room, and I'm sure there's a lot of others listening on the phone. Just for the benefit of Mr. Holster, if he's on the phone, I thoroughly appreciate the problem of having massive amounts of hemp brought to some of these facilities, and how do you segregate that? That's not a discussion for today. What I would suggest, though, Mr. Emmett did bring up the subject of working groups, and he himself had chaired the testing working group previously. So, a couple thoughts. One would be, first of all, that we as soon as possible get that group back on track and running, and then if Mr. Emmett so chooses, perhaps he could invite Mr. Shady to participate in that process with you and the labs, coming back to the board with recommendations on how we can tweak the regs, not just for the testing labs, but perhaps for the manufacturers as well, to facilitate with some of what you're talking about. So with that, I'll end my comments.
Just one more two-part question. Since it's a federal product, will interstate commerce be permitted in agricultural hemp?
As long as you're coming from a state-approved program or a USDA program. So, and under the 2018 Farm Bill, a state that does not have a program may not make the transport through that state illegal, may not touch that product.
Okay.
It is an agricultural product. So the poor trucker in Idaho is not going to get stopped and put
Right,
in jail.
right, sure. No, I was just wondering if this will contribute to Alaska's balance of trade, and it sounds like it will.
I
in a
think we have
positive
huge
sense.
opportunity.
Yes.
I think we have huge opportunity.
So it's actually turning into a three-part question. The second part was, since it can be interstate commerce, a grower could send samples to a laboratory outside of Alaska to be tested. Is that
we expect that
okay.
will have to be
right.
part of the startup. I don't think there's the
sure.
capacity here yet.
Right, and hopefully that'll build out.
Right.
And the third part is products manufactured from hemp, i.e. CBD.
Mm-hmm.
They are now considered federal agricultural products. I think you can buy them in any store. So that also has the potential for contributing in a positive sense to Alaska's balance of trade, where Alaska CBD manufacturers would be able to export CBD products to the lower 48. Would that seems like that would be legal.
We have to be careful how we word things.
Sure.
And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm
yeah,
not going to give you a legal
I
opinion. But the thing is, under FDA, it's still illegal for some of these products to be manufactured.
Uh-huh.
So if you're going across state lines, that's where you have the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But the really good point that was made in the 2018 Farm Bill is Congress said that industrial hemp is not an adulterant. And there's a current bill in Congress right now to require the FDA to register these products as a supplement.
Okay.
So it's an evolving legal issue, and I go to legal advice all the time about where we're going to draw these lines. So
it'll certainly make things I won't say complicated, but something in between interesting and fascinating for this board over the next year or so.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, Mr. Chair, that out-of-state product that complies with a state plan or a federal plan, or that gets tested here in Alaska, will also be part of the program. Either the manufacturer can request an endorsement for the product, or the retailer here in Alaska if the manufacturer is not taking that step.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Shady? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Appreciate your time, and we'll be seeing you again, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Okay, anybody else for people to be heard?
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Who would like to speak?
We'll go to the phones here.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Hi, I'm really close to you guys. For the record, Lacey Wilcox, President of the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association. I'm sorry, I have a pretty good cold today. First, I would like to thank Mark Springer for his service to Alaska. What a long, strange trip it has been, sir. And I really appreciate you. We appreciate you. We're going to miss you for lots of reasons. So to all of you, I must admit that the AMI is frustrated at a recent communication breakdown regarding the selection of Mr. Springer's replacement. We were under the impression that we would be submitting a list of names for consideration. We have spoken to the administration and do believe it was an oversight and that they indeed did not expect a list from us. However, we do want to remind those listening, and maybe the governor is listening, that we did do the work to compile and vet a list of qualified candidates for the rural seat. The AMIA was just about to hit send on a nomination letter that included, among a few others, 2 professional, knowledgeable Native Alaskan women. We were informed the morning of the public announcement that an appointee had been identified, someone we are not familiar with, and while I appreciate the governor's right to appoint who he sees fit, we had really hoped that the offer for collaboration to further the governor's Open for Business initiative was true. And we are left feeling skeptical again. We are open to learning more about Mr. Deshak, hopefully I didn't butcher that, and suppose that will happen through the legislative confirmation process. I would like to now speak to collaboration and communication. In recognizing that the new director has a full plate, we want to express our gratitude for the increase in direct communication. However, we feel there's a long way to go. I want to remind the director and his board that the AMI is eagerly awaiting communication on the many things our association has identified. We have chanted to you that we are available to alleviate the lack of expertise, and so far there has been no invitation to participate. There is nothing we can do but stand ready. Mr. Klinkart, we're ready. There does seem to be time, however, to develop legislation that this board will be asked to support without seeing. In that proposal, we are learning that the Division of Corporations, Business, and Professional Licensing will absorb the two boards. The AMIA is reserving judgment until it sees the language of that bill. However, I must point out that the concept is not what we were expecting. We were again misinformed, or perhaps we misunderstood, and thought that the boards would be split, but not absorbed, certainly. We maintain that under no circumstance should there be a diminishment of power, and are keenly aware that the details are critical and will comment through the legislative process as to our evaluation. I would now like to speak to the board about the temperature of the industry as it has been expressed to me. I hear from licensees all over the state asking why I would even entertain collaborating with this administration, and I say to them that progress cannot be achieved in a vacuum, and unless we all work together, forward momentum will certainly stall. I have been hopeful that with the Open for Business initiative we could find common ground, and I remain hopeful, but I need to speak for the industry, which has a justifiable lack of trust, and I must comfort them that we are not being taken for a ride. So I ask this board to better explain the decisions that you have made and that you will make going forward. I ask the director to please be transparent in your dealings, and I ask the administration to have an open, honest dialogue with the people who are so eager to converse. Speaking of having final language in your hands, I wanted to give you all a copy of House Joint Resolution 23, introduced on Tuesday. It is a legislative resolution urging the U.S. Senate to pass the Safe Banking Act, and I would kindly ask that this board consider supporting this important resolution as a public safety and smart business measure. This is another example of what the AMIA can do. We've been working with our counterparts across the country and in Washington, D.C. to get this as far as it has gone, and we would appreciate your continued support. You will be hearing more from the AMIA today, lucky you. So I will wrap it up with some words from one of my favorite philosophers and politicians, which is to understand the true quality of people, you must look into their minds and examine their pursuits and their aversions. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mark, very much.
Thanks, Lacey, and again, I appreciate
I'm going to hand this to you.
kind words from AMIA, and I've always just enjoyed working with you guys. You're very good representatives. Okay, we're going to open up the phone line.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning. We are still in public comment. Is there anybody on the line who would like to make a public comment?
Yes, I would.
Okay, go ahead. Introduce yourself to us.
Thank you. Good morning, AMCO Board. My name is Sam Hansen. I've been an Alaska resident since 1959 and serve on the North Lakes Community Board in the Matsu Borough. I requested a meeting with your acting director in November. And after reading his director's report of this meeting, I can see that he's been busy with staff and AMCO operations. His suggestions for new directors will be very good for AMCO and very timely. You're lucky to have him on board. I shared with you in the September meeting about AMCO's inability to service the Matsu Borough with odor control. Anchorage has 28 cultivating facilities. The Matsu Borough has 61. During the past 28 months, 27 odor violations were given out. Only 2 were for the Matsu Borough. Of the 27, 17 were written in 2019. 2 cultivation facilities were in front of you in your September meeting for odor violations. They had 12 odor violations between them. That wasn't shared with you. AMCO responded to 25 Anchorage odor complaints on the same day they were called in, except for 2, which were drive-bys. In April of 2019, Mr. Happy Farms, a limited cultivation facility, started operating. Their owner stated on social media in May he would address the odor complaints because he did not want an AMCO notice of violation. In June, they received a violation for odor. It stated that an MCB crew witnessed marijuana odor throughout the day while working across from this facility. This is the exact location where our school bus stops 4 times a day. During your September board meeting, Mr. Happy Farms owner, Matthew Shelter, stated he did many wonderful things to correct the odor for the June violation. That did not fix the problem. Your staff did not share with you at that time they had 4 months of odor complaints for Mr. Happy Farms. He was considered in compliance for renewal. On his application for odor control, it states they would install an HVAC system and nothing else to address odor emissions. Your enforcement office received odor complaints for Mr. Happy Farms during June, July, August, September, October, November, December, and this month consistently. This odor has been so strong it burns your eyes, engulfs their lots to where they have to shut their doors and windows not to have it inside their property. They don't even open their garage door to park inside because it would go into their home. They can't be outside on their property during these times, and if that's the case, Mr. Happy Farms has to know he has an odor problem. You were contacted with complaints during working hours only to send out an enforcement officer the next day. In October, these residents were asked to document the wind and the strength of the odor, so they've been doing that. An enforcement officer actually said that if they wait for Mr. Happy Farm's renewal in September, they would have a good concern to bring forward. In June of 2019, during your board meeting, James stated that he was getting a lot of odor complaints. In your September 2019 meeting minutes, after I shared this with you, James stated that he doesn't find it to be a secret that he's an advocate for those suffering from odor complaints. This is the biggest concern for non-marijuana users. Odor complaints are investigated as possible, and it's about what's important to spend time on. He is more concerned with diversion, metric issues, and that type of problem, quote from the minute. So if you're prioritizing complaints, why did you provide 17 odor violations in Anchorage last year? Are you prioritizing complaints coming from the Mat-Su Borough? AMCO is the only organization that has the responsibility to control odor from cultivation facilities. In May of 2019, you tabled your proposed fine schedule. Please revisit this. This is a tool that can assist your enforcement staff with all license violations. Our 61 cultivation facilities are located next to families and not on commercial property. They experience odor after your 4 p.m. hours and on weekends when you're closed. You cannot respond to us with those parameters because odor cannot be followed up after the fact. After AMCO inspects the waiting licenses, the Valley will have 72 cultivation facilities and Anchorage will have 33. Ask yourself, how long would you put up with odor from a cultivation facility next to your home? How many calls to AMCO would you consider acceptable? As of today, these residents have been putting up with odor that engulfs their property and affects their quality of life for 252 days. This isn't acceptable. I hope you read the letter from Kazina, Mr. Happy Farm's neighbor. It's in your correspondence for today's meeting. In James' enforcement report, he says, I am left with the thought that there is a need for additional staff who conduct inspections and review permits. I spoke with Mat-Su Borough Senators Wilson, Showers, and Hughes. I spoke with Mat-Su Representatives Leonard, Kermans, Rauscher, Eastman, Johnson, and Tilton. They are now aware that our borough residents are being ignored by you when it comes to odor control. I'm sure they would be happy to find a desk at the Legislative Information Office for an AMCO staffer to use so you can respond in real time to odor and enforce regulations for the marijuana licenses, just like you do in Anchorage. I encourage the board to visit a cultivation facility if you haven't already. And I thank you for allowing me to speak.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hanson. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Shirley.
One quick question. Mr. Happy Farms, is that an indoor grow or is that outdoor?
It's a limited. He has his own building that he built in 2018. Came before you in 2018 of December. He's located 60 feet from a school lot line.
Is some of the odor that you mentioned, is it coming from outdoor grows in the summertime, or do you know that? Do you have any?
There is no outdoor grows. It's coming from his building.
Okay, thanks.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Springer.
Mr. Tiny.
What's the status of the regulations product or group for the bail schedule? I know a few months ago or a few sessions ago we talked about it, but then it just kind of went away. Do you know the status?
This is Interim Director Clean Card. That is one of the things that some of the changes, some of the things that I'm trying to do, because it became clear, even in my own, that unless I had working group meetings starting at 1 in the morning, there just isn't the time. So that is one of the top priorities, is to essentially not only working groups for these sort of things, but also to be able to then help this board so that you get a consensus in those working groups and suggestions, which will help this board with its time, but also be able to hear from all these other people. So just as Mr. Emmett said very, very clearly, I think it's not a want, it's a need to have these working groups.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else on the phone that would like to testify, or people have you heard? Public comment.
Yes, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes, this is Denise Isaacs in Kenai, Alaska, and I believe that we need to have more testing about bugs. We need to know whether or not there are 10 spider mites or 10 bugs in a 1 gram sample. We need to know this. This is for many different reasons. I also feel that we are lacking, as in other states, testing for heavy metals. As you are aware, cannabis is an accumulative plant, and it absorbs its surroundings, and it is vital that, and there are a lot of heavy metals even in organic growing. And we need to have testing for heavy metals like other states, and we need to have testing and have it specified on those test results of those bugs that are present. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And anybody else on the phone line?
Yes. Yeah, good morning to the board.
Okay, good. The gentleman who said good morning to the board.
Yeah, good morning to the board. Hey, this is Kirby Coleman here. Mr. Springer, sorry to see you go. Definitely appreciate you volunteering in your time. I would just like to kind of echo what a few people have already said about the committees that are being formed. I think that it would be advantageous for not only the board, enforcement, and those of us in the industry, but to actually put out an announcement. I know you guys had done it before for one committee that I saw in an email asking if you wanted my participation. I did volunteer my participation, although I was not accepted for that committee. It would be nice to see more committees formed to discuss various regulation projects, testing requirements, all sorts of different things that is very challenging for enforcement, for the board, and for just the people that are writing the regulations. That I think those of us that are in the industry that want to participate, rather than the board being an appointed thing or asking specific individuals if they want to participate, just like it was before about asking the industry for their want to participate, so that not only is it something that they're invested in, but also that it's being that these things are being proactively worked through. So it was my only suggestion, and like I said, I would love to help participate in developing the industry and bringing it forward. So appreciate you guys' time, and hope you guys enjoyed Juneau. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kirby. Appreciate that. Okay, let's close the phone for right now. Anybody else in the room like to come on up?
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Hi, my name is Caleb Saunders. I'm a director for the AMA, but I'm just speaking as myself at the moment. Kind of to go about, this wasn't what I had planned, but I wanted to touch on it real quick. Going to that odor violation, I think if you were to consider every other industry, including fishing, canning, all the breweries, everything else, there is no odor whatsoever, and any controls over them at all. So if our industry is the only one that's being held to odor violations, and as you could hear that lady expressing how difficult it is to say whether this is or isn't because it's such a subjective thing, and there's no true health, it's not causing any true harm, I mean, not any more than the smell of fish guts wafting everywhere, and it's wasting enforcement time. If you go look at the NOVs that have been written throughout this year, 18 of them just from the last meeting were odor violations. If you were to simply get rid of that, it would give up enforcement's time to be able to go do things that actually do have to do with health and safety, rather than something that allows the general public to keep harassing somebody that they don't like, that the last time their issues didn't get that business shut down. Now they're going to just keep calling odor and odor and odor and odor and odor and odor and odor. And when does that end? When it's not even a health or safety. But that was just a thought I wanted to think about. Let's have the rules be ones that are actually doing something rather than just allowing harassment. So what I really wanted to come up here and talk about, in the beginning we talked about the public comments. I just want to read real quick what's on the alcohol regulations. At its public meetings, the board will receive public comment upon its agenda business and other issues of public interest related to alcoholic beverages, including conduct of the business by licensees and compliance by licensees, and others within the statute and regulations related to alcohol beverages. Public comment may also be submitted to the board in writing at any person, or in writing by any person at any time. So as a licensee that's been coming to these meetings since the very beginning, I would say it's somewhat inconsistent. In the beginning, the public comment is for anything that's not on the agenda, because when that agenda item comes up, we are going to be talking about that, and we don't want to split the comment but in the two sections. So that a beginning one is for anything that's not on there, because you're going to accept comment on all the other ones. However, leading up to this point, so far the only ones that you accept comment on are ones that somebody has written in public comment against it. That's the only time you do it, is when you want to give somebody else an extra bite to complain about them. And then I just want to say that let me gather myself for a moment real quick. The comments should be able to be on each of the items so that you know what's going on, rather than, I remember what I wanted to say is some of those comments that sparked the public comment in the meeting were comments that received out of time that weren't even allowed to be in the comment, but because we want to allow all the commenters that want to complain, we added it in there, gave them an extra comment, and it's just, I would say that the easiest way to clean it up is that beginning ones for anything else not on there, and then when each item comes up, if somebody has something to talk about that item, we should do that. In Alaska, our regulations moved slow because we have public comment, and it's something that we all made and not just some people in a room. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kirby, and
Caleb Saunders.
Oh, yeah. I always get you guys mixed up. I don't know why. Sorry, Caleb. So I guess looking at the alcohol regulation, is that regulation or statute about public comment?
I think you said regulation.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that might make life easier for us. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, anybody else in the room? Sure, come on up.
Very interesting and tough acts to. My name is Ryan Tunseth. I'm a retail store owner from Kenai, Alaska. I traveled all this way from Kenai to Juneau, so I thought I should speak. I'm doing so while my 16-year-old son is playing basketball at Mount Edgecombe, which I think is more of a thank you and an acknowledgement that industry is here with you guys in doing this. So I appreciate being here. When I'm wearing my business cap, I represent E-Strip, and that's what I'm here to do today. I also serve on the board of directors for the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association, and I'm very proud to see so many of them here in support as well. Thank you to the City of Juneau. Thank you to the new director, specifically for your positive comments about the staff and projecting a vision for your office. Thank you to all the state officials, staff, and employees, and anyone that has made public comment a priority this morning. Thank you to board members for your service. You have a very strong and independent board, and I think are poised to continue doing this hard work. Thank you to Mr. Springer for your leadership. You've been a compassionate voice for Alaskans and instrumental in the foundation of our regulations. I think that we're at a point in Alaska where making money in marijuana is realized. I've struggled like many businesses trying to find a balance between what this market and industry is, where it's going, what the outcomes will be. It's a constant stream of testing or tax or price or 280 this or COGS that. It's somewhere between taxed twice by your ignorance and high tide only floating big boats while the rest of us swim. I think there's just a lot of head trash in this industry. We have been the most inaccessible state for obtaining a license, period. We denied outside investment, required residency, low fees. We must also acknowledge that ease of access will create some poised for an early departure, and that's okay. We must also acknowledge that if we are to build a sustainable industry in Alaska, we must be able to decide what our real objectives are with taxing it. We're not huge revenue, we understand that, but nobody is lining up for marijuana to fill our pipeline. This industry is marijuana mutualism in Alaska. It exists long-term if we want it to, and if we create value in Alaska marijuana brands, Alaska marijuana products, Alaskan farmers, or it exists as a bubble, and like I said, most of the Alaska marijuana money that has been realized, it goes away. This time in the form of kilowatt hours or production cost or shipping cost or federal legalization or border rules, etc. I do not support a tax change to retail sales. I'm fearful that the yield of retail tax will severely be restricted over time. We've been cautious and incremental up to this point. We don't agree on tax change. There's not any real evidence to suggest that the current tax is not working properly. We have held our price better than any other state. It's stable and predictable and easy to apply. I do, however, support a 2-year moratorium on cultivation licenses because I believe production has exceeded demand in Alaska. I think this would pump the brakes and allow the market and administration to formulate a long-term strategy. Sunset provisions and sideboards should consider length, existing license options for growth, license types, etc. I think it would give pause for everyone to really circle the wagons and focus on the mom-and-pop base that we turn to first for product, while allowing the market and the board to focus on a vision for Alaska marijuana. Anyone that would object to this should really take a hard look at the numbers and proceed with extreme caution if you believe jumping into cultivation alone now will be easy or profitable. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Sanchez. Any questions? And, I've told a couple of people that any discussion about taxation needs to start from a policy perspective, and I think that's about what you did there, and I think you had a lot packed in there, and probably worth listening to a couple of times. Thank you very much. Okay, let's check the phones again real quick. Try to go half and half here.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Okay, is there anybody else on the phone that would like to testify to the Marijuana Control Board under public comment?
Yes.
Go right ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Tani Sekrichia, and I am an Anchorage resident for 20 years. I also serve on my local community council executive board. And one thing I wanted to make note of, especially after hearing so many industry folks get a chance to talk about the importance of having the industry input in the rules and regulations and looking at the system works and how to make it better for them, is just getting a little insight from a community member who had zero concept of any of the rules, regulations, and just how this process worked until about 3 or 4 months ago when I started looking into cannabis licensees in my neighborhood. And what I realized very quickly was there's a lot of information, and it is very convoluted. It's often hard to understand and interpret. And the information that's posted on the AMCO website, including all of the different tabs that you have to go back and search, makes it really hard for a community member, and I assume any other person in the industry or or anybody else looking for the information. It's very hard to track by company or licensee. So, for instance, if there's a licensee that is coming up for renewal in Anchorage, and it has a long history of problems in our neighborhood, and I want to find official documentation of this evidence, whether it's NOVs or other actions that have been discussed with the Marijuana Control Board. It's very difficult for that to happen. You have to go back throughout the years. You have to click through each Marijuana Control Board meeting and click through all the different tabs. So what I would love for to happen moving forward is for some sort of database system to be created where it's easily searchable and where documents live under a licensee and aren't so spread out and kind of tucked away in different parts of the website. And then the other thing that I would hope moving forward is as you create these working groups and as you look to see how this process is working, that you also get input from the community members, because we are also a part of this process, especially as the statutes afford us a right to be involved in this. And I think what I've seen from my level in the Anchorage area is that Anchorage Assembly members and committee members rely very heavily on how well it's going, or on the assumption that it's going well and everything is happening smoothly on your level. And so I just hope that you consider getting community input along the process as well to make sure that we are also included, because there are still some of us who don't. I believe in cannabis legalization. I think it should be legalized federally. However, there are still some of us who don't smoke marijuana, don't consume it, and still want to live in a community where we're all treated equally with equal respect in the different matters. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and that's all I wanted to say.
All right, thanks very much, and your point's well taken about a database. I saw the director scribbling furiously. No, there is a lot of information, and you're right. You do have to sift through meetings to find that stuff. So thank you, Ms. Segricha. Thank you. Okay, anybody else on the line that would like to testify?
Can I share one more thing?
Who's this?
This is Sam Hansen.
Very quickly, please.
Very quickly. Information is shared with all community councils prior to you approving a license. Community councils are all volunteers. They don't have an office. You allow them 30 days to respond for their community. You allow all governing bodies 60 days. Please change that to allow community councils 60 days to respond, just like a borough or a governing body, to any of your applications. They can't do it in 30 days. They meet once a month in a 30-day period. So allowing them to 60 days would be very helpful for all community councils.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Is there anybody else on the line that would like to testify, like public comment?
Yes, hello?
Go ahead.
Hi, I would just like to, my name is Chris. I would just like to emphasize...
Chris, could identify yourself for the record?
I'm Chris calling from Anchorage, and...
Say your name calling from Anchorage, Chris?
Chris French.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to emphasize what I view the importance of, I think it's going to come up today, but the importance of pesticide testing in the state. I think that, this issue with Common Collective is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of facilities using unapproved pesticides on their product. The marijuana industry is filled with challenges for cultivators, and some of these facilities are not managed in a way that is conducive to following the regulations. And I think that when some of these businesses get, they're in debt or they need to pull harvest off, they'll kind of take whatever measures they can to get to a finish line and get product out. And I think that this is an issue that's probably occurring all across the state, and without a testing program, there's just no way to verify what's being sprayed on this crop that people are consuming. And furthermore, a lot of this, scientific data is not there on what the harm is when you're combusting these harmful carcinogenic chemicals. And so, as part of a regulated market, I just think it's extremely important to have testing, and that we're not just trusting, these profit-seeking businesses to apply, just to to apply good morals and standards to how they conduct business. I just think enforcement will be important on that. So thank you. That's all I had to add.
Okay, thanks an awful lot, Chris. Go ahead and shut the phone off. Let me recognize, if I'm not thoroughly mistaken,
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Yeah, you're not Representative Ledoux? Oh, I'm sorry. Everybody up here said, yeah, we think she is. Spitting image. I apologize. Not in a bad way. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. And with that, on top of that, some of you may have noticed I beat my record in Nome when I spilled coffee all over myself with this stupid smoothie. It's not a gunshot wound.
I can help with
that. Yeah, you can help with that. Yeah, thanks a lot. By the end of the day, we may ask you to. Okay, is there anybody else in the room? Ms. Wiltseen.
Jana Wiltseen, for the record, attorney representing quite a few marijuana companies and a director at MIA, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. First, we'd like to thank Mark Springer. Wow, it's been a long, strange trip, but a wonderful trip, and we've really enjoyed you on this board. And the institutional knowledge that you have brought to the table, it's irreplaceable, and we're going to miss you. And the contributions that you have brought to this industry it has been vital to the growth and the structure, and honestly, the sheer creation of our industry. And so, you know, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you were one of the fighters to keep this Alaskan-owned. And because you did that, you gave Alaskans a chance to have their own business, to be the Alaskan dream, which is to be a pioneer and to try something new. So it's not just the gold rush that Alaska can be famous for, oil. Now we have marijuana, and it was protected and careful stewardship by you. So we thank you for your guidance, your patience, your wisdom, and what we may miss most of all, your humor. And so by and large, I think that you will be greatly missed, and I don't want this to be your last MCB meeting. But if Bruce Schulte has taught us anything, you can always be a comeback kid, and so maybe we'll see you again. Yeah. Okay, moving on from that for now. One thing I would like to ask the board to consider approving is temporary approvals for MJ16s, which are new products, delegating that authority to the director to temporarily approve standard industry products such as rosin, shattered, infused joints, and wax. Those are things that are always usually included in product manufacturing applications. It's usually things you guys approve in groups and clumps. It doesn't have coloring issues or flavor issues or variation in ingredients, and it might be something that could help streamline the industry and help make business sense. I'd like you to consider that today, and I don't think that would need a regulation change. I think that's just a delegation of authority to our new director, which brings me to my next point. AMCO staff has been incredibly resilient and has persevered and actually, in my view, gotten even better during these moments of change. You know, I was here for the alcohol meeting. It was Carrie's first meeting, and she nailed it. And you'll hear her later. She's a very good public speaker, and I'm just really happy she got the chance to do this, so thank you. And so I've really actually enjoyed the new change with AMCO. I mean, from Ms. Wilson to Director Klinkhardt, I felt much more involved in the process. Director Klinkhardt brought the entire AMCO staff to several marijuana facilities and toured them through. And for some of these staff members that are sitting here doing, figuring out diagrams and operational plans they had never even been in a marijuana facility before. So I think the director taking this time out of his day, which I'm sure stacks up his email and adds more hours to his week, is so important. And I really enjoyed having staff from AMCO come through and ask really intelligent questions, and I think it was really valuable. So thank you for doing that and taking the time. I want to follow up on points that Lacey Wilcox raised. We were pretty disappointed that, in our understanding, we were asked to provide a list of suggestions from AMIA for the royal seat, which included Mark Springer, and it also included several Alaska Native women that we've been struggling to have a woman on the board for once. But we still we didn't get to submit that list, and we were alerted to the new board member. And I as Officer Jaime has shown us, new board members from this administration seem to be pretty good. So we hope that trend continues, and we welcome Casey, and but we do hope for meaningful collaboration in the future. Like, we do hope for that. At the ABC meeting, I noticed that the board was asked to support legislation in theory that they haven't seen yet, and I heard a wise man say during that meeting, well, the devil's in the details. And it certainly is. So I would hope you would have that wisdom that you've always had to see things for yourself before signing on board. So I just wanted to say that. I really do support how Director Klinkhardt describes an AMCO-MCB internal split in his board report, and I think that actually makes sense. So I do hope when we see this bill that Director Klinkhardt's vision is captured in that unseen legislation. I do hope that is the way the bill is drafted. I would hope you would encourage you to support a letter of resolution to support the Safe Banking Act that the House and the Senate is considering to move over to the federal government and asking them to pass that federal law, Safe Banking Act. So I do hope you consider that today. And I would 110 support Caleb's comments that he made earlier about public notice and public comments and being more consistent on that front. And with that, that's all I have, and I entertain questions if anybody had any.
Any questions for Jana? Okay, and again, thank you for the kind words. And
thank
I'm
you.
sure at the end of the meeting I might have something to say about you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else in the room that would like to testify? Going once, going twice? All right, I think we'll close public comment about 10:15. We ready for a 10-minute break? Okay, I'm seeing nods all around, so we're only a little behind the schedule. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. If we're back by 10, we'll be good. Yeah. Give me time to change. Sure. Okay, let's get back at it. Mr. Schulte, Mr. Director. Oh, is that for me? Oh, yeah, that's what that thing was. Gotcha. Okay, we're gonna come back to order, and we're actually going to go back on the phone for a second. I know that Sarah Oates was wanting to make some public comment, and we kind of there, so we're going to give her.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
So, Miss Oates, are you with us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go right ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you.
For the record, Sarah Oates. I'm the president and CEO of Alaska Char. I'm also a director for AMI, and as most of the board knows, a former employee of the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office. And my testimony today is really just representing myself and speaking as that former employee. First of all, Mr. Springer, I'd like to thank you for your service to the state, to the industry, to the staff. You've done a very remarkable job, and I appreciate the time and energy that you have put into the entire process. I also would like to echo statements that were made by Caleb Saunders earlier. He cited a regulation that I don't need to repeat. And I would also respectfully disagree with your recollection of the process of how public testimony has been taken by the board. As a member of the staff who helped create those original processes for receiving public testimony, the intention was that the public testimony period that was scheduled at every meeting was for items that were not on the agenda, because public testimony would be taken for agenda items at the time that the board was considering those agenda items. That was the original intent, and that seems to have changed a little bit over the years. Public comment is a very vital component of the public process in these board meetings, and I would very much encourage the board to consider either doing a regulation process or adopting by policy the language that is in the alcohol regulations under 3 AAC 304.035, which says that at its public meetings, the board will receive public comment upon items of agenda business and other issues of public interest relating to, in this case, marijuana, including the conduct of business by licensees and the compliance by licensees and others with statutes and regulations related to marijuana. Public comment may also be submitted to the board in writing by any person at any time. So that's just one recommendation and request that I have. The other comment that I would like to make is that I would very much urge this board to vehemently oppose any sort of legislation that would consolidate your staff with another division, with another agency. It is vital that you have an independent agency and independent staff. You've heard a lot of comments and concerns about timing and how difficult it can be for your staff to go back and forth from regulating one industry versus the other because they're similar yet different. And those struggles and all of the concerns that you've heard about would be exacerbated if your staff is moved under another division. That being said, I do very much support the concept of adding 2 executive administrators. I think that having independent employees for each of the boards would be incredibly useful. I think that's an excellent idea, and I very much would encourage you to support that concept. But please do not. I would dissuade you from specific legislation. I would have concerns about you losing your incredible staff. And while it can be argued that everybody's replaceable, you have a really amazing team who's doing an excellent job, is extremely knowledgeable, works very hard. I would think that you would want to do anything in your power to retain them as much as possible. And that's the extent of my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, and I appreciate your kind words as well. Okay, now we're going to close public comment, and we're going to move on to tab 2, testing lab regulations. Turn the phone off, please.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This right here, some of the backgrounds. The board opened this regulations project having to do with retesting on February 20th, 2019 to clarify the circumstances that warrant a retest. Currently, a licensee selects a, quote, representative homogeneous sample, unquote, and sends it to testing. If it fails a required test, the licensee may request to have a retest. If a retest is approved, then the licensee selects a different representative homogeneous sample. Because microbes and fungi such as E. coli and Aspergillus are not spread evenly throughout a harvest batch, the results of a second test don't have any relation to the validity of the first test. Just because a retest passed doesn't mean that the failure of the first test was incorrect. In addition, if a retest is granted and passes, then there is one failed test and one passed test. Begs the question, which is correct? The only way to resolve this problem is if the same material of the original test is used for the retest. This draft regulation change proposes the following. 1, a cultivation licensee who wishes to have the ability to request a retest shall provide 16 grams of marijuana to the testing facility in the, quote, required sample, quote, and in a reserve sample, unquote. The testing facility shall grind, homogenize, and mix the sample to reserve quantities together, use a portion for the initial test, and keep the remaining material in a secure manner. If the initial test fails and the cultivation facility requests and is approved for a retest, the cultivation facility decides that either the original testing facility shall perform a retest on the remaining material, or the original testing facility shall transfer the remaining material at the cultivator's expense to a different testing facility, which shall perform the retest. The retest shall be performed in duplicate so that ultimately there are 3 test results. If 2 of the 3 tests pass, the harvest batch package passes testing. If 2 of the 3 tests fail, the harvest batch package fails testing and must either be destroyed or the cultivation facility may request permission to transfer it for extraction. In addition, the draft regulation allows a product manufacturer to request a retest of a product that passed retesting, but for which the licensee wishes to reprocess to further reduce residual solvent levels. The final draft proposal allows a request for a retest for potency if a narrative justifying the request and photographic evidence of why a retest is needed is submitted. The board has stated in the past that it does not see a need for retest for potency. Quote-unquote potency shopping, i.e. finding the lab that gives the highest potency results, should not be permitted. There are some options for the board to consider. 1, put out for public comment. 2, amend and put out for public comment. 3, send back to staff for revisions. Or 4, close the project without action.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion of any of those choices on this to start some discussion?
Chair?
Yeah, good.
I would move that we put this regulation out for public comment.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Jaime. So, any discussion on the regulation by the board?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
Do you know if this has been through DEC and the testing committee?
Terry, do we know? I don't think so. We'll check and let you know. Okay, I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess based on that comment, I won't support putting it out for public comment. I would prefer that we table it and send it back to the testing committee and make sure DEC is involved as well. I don't want to put a regulation out if they haven't at least run it through the process and make sure we have DEC agreement.
Mr. Chair, I can tell you in our past process with the hemp regulations, we put the regulations out for public comment and at the same time sought interagency comment. And if we believe that substantive changes were necessary, we came back to the DNR and then again the public to put those out. So technically, you can handle both processes at the same time if you would prefer that. But I leave it to the board.
Then I would have another question for the director. If we were to do that, are you able to get the testing committee together and DEC together in that timeframe?
My father taught me never make a promise you can't keep, but I think we can do our best, especially in the next 45 days, get something set up.
And you can also extend the period of public comment if you think you need more time for that discussion.
Yeah, as long as the official comment from other agencies comes in a timely manner. We've had cases where it's come in late and forbearance has been sought. So, you okay with that, Mr. Miller? Or vote however you want.
Yeah, I'll probably vote out.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, good, Mr. Shirley.
I share Mr. Miller's concerns. On the one hand, I would like to seek off public comment, but I do think that testing committee should be able to weigh in on this. Kind of a footnote, in past discussions, I think I'd suggested that DEC should be part of that testing committee, so it's not a completely separate input stream, because I think that having them in the room and formally talking to the representatives from the testing labs and some of the licensees could really streamline that process. So with that, I will probably support putting this out for public comment, but I'll also be pushing to see that testing committee take it up as one of the various projects that they need to look at.
Okay, great. Speaking of DEC, were they going to be on the agenda today? Was Steve Krupe supposed to talk to us?
His number if we want to call him.
Well, were we going to give him a time certain to speak to the board? I don't see him on the agenda.
I actually had a note. It was during this time because of the testing lab regulations that we
Okay.
can call him and you guys can question him.
Well, maybe under. Well, that would be more on number 3, on tab 3.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one quick question, point of clarification for legal counsel. I just want to make sure that in putting this out for public comment and then simultaneously referring it to an informal committee doesn't get us sideways. I mean, we're not going to get in a position where we can't accept the input of that committee because it's out in public for public comment. I just want to make sure we don't get eye-centered there.
Yeah. So if your working group, et cetera, gives you solely technical amendments, you don't have to resubmit it to public comment. But if you get substantive comments from that working group and you believe the public should then weigh in on that as well, then you would go out for a second public comment period. A lot of it depends on what you are going to get. And that I can't tell you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
For the attorney, several years ago, I think when we started the on-site review process, there were several agencies and groups outside of government that requested to meet with staff to talk with the board about the regulations. They were informed that since they were out for public comment, that was not permissible, that that was considered ex parte communication with the board, and they were denied that. They also asked if they could put together a group to review the regulations with staff. They were told no. And so I question whether or not we could have a working group while the regulations are out for public comment. Because basically what you're doing is allowing a segment of the public to have communication with the board and the staff outside of the public eye during a public comment period. So whether or not that's allowable, whether or not we got advice from the Attorney General's office that's different from the advice the Attorney General's office would give us now. But I don't see where we, the staff and the board, could meet with any industry representatives during a process when it's out for public comment. And if in fact I'm correct, then I would probably withdraw my motion. But it would seem to me that we need to be very, very clear if in fact the Administrative Procedures Act allows for such a working group and the communication between staff and a working group on regulations are out for public comment.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Wilson.
The key of the process of the Administrative Procedure Act with the regulations is just as you've noted that the public have the right to comment. Now, agencies and working groups can be just as much a part of the public as Joe's citizen. You raise an interesting technical issue about access to the board, and are you asserting that that would occur through the working group because you would be members of the working group?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on who's part of the working group,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly they would have access to the staff that's responsible for taking the public comments.
And the other thing about public comments is they need to be public. So I would assume that with your working groups, you would have minutes of those meetings as well. I guess I'm not seeing someone getting an unfair advantage if what happens is that you have all of these comments that are recorded either in letter or minutes or in public hearing, and then the board at the end of the day takes those comments and determines if they're going to amend a project, if they're going to send it back out. I'm not trying to dissuade any of you of the advice. I've just seen it work the other way and work successfully the other way. So if you think there's going to be so much comment in the industry that you're going to have a substantive rewrite of these regulations, then I would recommend that you go to the working group first. If you don't, I would recommend that, I would tell you that you could have a concurrent process.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I will withdraw my motion.
Is a second okay with that? Okay. So, Mr. Schuller, you had a question, or?
Well, no, I think we got where
We're back to square
that's where
one.
I said it. So I would like to make another motion.
Sure, go right ahead.
That we instead refer this proposed regs project to the testing group.
Well, back to staff to take it to the testing group.
Okay. Like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was almost going to suggest that, it can go back to staff. The testing group can maybe meet, within the next 30 days, and then the board could have a telephonic meeting to just take action on this regulation, to send it out for public comment if that's what the board would choose to do, and that way the clock would start ticking. By the time you have the next meeting in April, the regulation will be out there, and it might speed things up instead of waiting until April to vote to send it out to public comment and ticking the clock further to June. But
if I may just add to that, so my concerns were procedural, but I see this also as an opportunity for some efficiency, because there's other testing projects, or there's other projects out there that could potentially be combined into one project. So I was hoping maybe the testing group could look at all of those and simultaneously clear up some outstanding testing projects, kind of clear the decks, and give us some more meaningful input so we have a better product to put out for public review.
yeah, it sounds good. So is there a second for the motion to return the regulation to staff with the intent that it goes to the testing working group?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Jones?
I guess the testing work group met for, I'll probably get this wrong, at least 6 months, if not 9 months. A few things came out of there that led to regulation change, but I don't know that we ever got to the place where we wanted to get to in terms of the testing group, where, in terms of either industry standards or things that we should apply to. So I would just caution us that putting together a work testing group may not get us the answers. Scientists tend to disagree with each other. The industry certainly has a bias to have the testing regulations be the easiest for them. The scientists have a bias to make sure that it is scientifically rigorous, despite whatever the cost might be to the grower or to the testing group. So in choosing who's part of that testing group, I think staff needs to be very cautious and broad in who they invite, which may slow down the process. I understand that. The more people you get in the room, more opinions you have. I've been in government long enough to know that, camel is designed by a horse, and if you have a two-hump camel, your committee was too big. And so I just think we need to be cautious, but I'm not sure that the testing working group is going to be our total answer and it's going to lead us where we want to go.
Okay, thanks. I am informed that Mr. Krupe, who is essentially our contractor on testing, DEC, is on the line. Does the board have any objection to opening the line up to him? Okay, Mr. Krupe, I'm told that you have, your staff have reviewed the testing regulations. Have you got some comments?
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Here, Springer, this is Steve Krupe. I didn't hear what you just said.
Okay, I am given to understand that DEC and you, your staff, have reviewed these proposed testing regulations. Do you have any comments on them? And we're addressing you since we do have this MOA with DEC on testing oversight. So go ahead.
Yes, we did participate in review of the retest regulation proposal that Director Klinkhart just relayed to you. At this time, I don't have any further comments on that text.
Okay, I will infer that that's a good thing. Okay, Mr. Krupe, thank you. And we'll just hang on the line here for a few minutes. Maybe we'll get some other questions for you. So, with that, we have a motion to send this back to staff. Let's make sure that when the working group is put together, there is some notification to the entire board of what the makeup of it is, just so that everybody knows that proper parties are represented, and if anybody has any concerns about the balance, they can be brought up with the director and staff, and try to get the numbers good. That sound okay to you, Mr. Jones? All right, thank you. Okay, then on the motion to send the retesting regulations project back to staff and to a testing working group. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Marijuana testing oversight, Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regulations Project, Testing Oversight. This regulations project contained proposed changes to improve the oversight of testing facilities. The attached proposed regulations changes strengthen the role of the board's contractor by 1, requiring the contractor review testing facility applications and provide a report on the application to the board. 2, adopting by reference a testing facility compliance manual attached, drafted by Steve Krupe of DEC's Environmental Health Lab, and requiring any changes to a testing facility's standard operating procedures to be approved by the board's contractor or the board. In addition, the requirement for a marijuana testing facility to pay all costs of random validation is removed, but the renewal fee for a testing facility license is proposed to be increased. These changes will support the board's contract with DEC to fulfill the role of the board's contractor as referenced in 3 AAC 306, Article 6. The changes to the regulation language in 3 AAC 306.100 and 3 AAC 306.620 and 3 AAC 306.635 and 3 AAC 306.640 were not specifically reviewed by the testing working group, but the language has now been through 3 public comment periods, so there has been ample opportunity for comment. The testing working group reviewed the proposed compliance manual. In addition, as required by the board, Mr. Krupe specifically sought comments on the compliance manual from all licensed testing facilities in order to make any necessary final changes before sending it out for a 3rd round of comments. The proposed regulations and compliance document were sent out for a 3rd round of public comments for 32 days. 4 comments were received, which are attached. Options for the board. 1, vote to adopt as written. 2, amend. If amendment is significant, put out for public comment. 3, send back to staff for revisions. Or 4, close the project without action.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I propose motion to vote to adopt as written.
Okay, there's a motion to adopt the, seconded by Mr. Jones. Any discussion? And let's just take 1 second to look at the comments that we got here. American Safe Access.
We wouldn't buy another 2 loaves.
AMA is opposed to it.
We can still buy 1 loaf.
Okay, any,
Thank you.
yeah, go ahead. And go ahead and use your phone.
Okay, so we'll have
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Support adopting this right now because I think there's sufficient. I'd like to see the testing labs have a little bit more input on this, and I'm kind of uncomfortable with raising the fees, although I understand the impetus behind that. I understand Mr. Jones' concerns that maybe we're expecting too much of this testing committee. I would prefer to see a representative group of the testing labs and the licensees and others, including DEC, evaluate this for just how effective it's going to be, because I'm not a chemist, and I'm a little I can't evaluate the testing manual personally, so I'd like to have somebody who does know that process be able to look at it and say, yeah, this is not going to completely hamstring us. So I'm not really willing to support this right now, and just at this time. Perhaps later with a little bit more input.
Okay, I got a question for Mr. Krupa. Turn the phone back on. So,
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Mr. Krupa, you still with us? I'm here. Yeah. So, we had some fairly substantial comments from Peak Analytical on this. Did you go through those, and were any of those comments incorporated into your final draft of the manual? And what are your, what's your view on your discussion? And just one second, Steve. Folks, please mute your telephones. We hear a bunch of conversations going in the background. We're trying to hear from DEC about testing regulations. I'm sure everybody on the line is interested in testing, so mute your telephones. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Krupe.
I'm sorry, Chair Springer, with all the feedback, everything you said.
Okay, yeah. Folks, mute your phones. So, Mr. Krupe, my question was, we have a comment here from Peak Analytical that's really quite detailed, and the sort of comment we would expect from somebody who'd be subject to this regulation. Have you had a chance to review their comments from November, and were any of that incorporated into your manual, or is there something in here that you think is worth further attention in the regulation process prior to us adopting this regulation?
I did see the comments from Peak Analytical, and there were some adjustments made to the document before the last public comment period. I believe the document is ready to vote to adopt as it is after going through the technical working group, which did have representatives from each part of the industry, including 4 commercial labs and the 3 state labs. There were, I am aware, I think it was Board Member Jones that mentioned, scientists will lean towards rigor and industry will lean towards what's easiest, and I believe we considered both angles in the drafting of this document. The intent is to make sure that the testing is done right in the interest of public safety, but also having defensible data. So if there is a question in the data, we can look at the processes that were done to generate results, and we can defend the data. Or if something went awry, we can't defend the data. And so I believe the document as it is, with all the parties that have reviewed it, I think it's ready to adopt as is.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Harmey.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's no perfect regulation. This proposal has been out to for public comment 4 times. The DEC took into account the industry's concerns, it appears. You know, if we continue just pushing these regulation projects off and not make any decisions, you know, we're going to become irrelevant eventually. So we need to start making decisions, I believe, on these regulations projects.
Sure, no, I gotcha. And Mr. Krupe, I know you're going to be jumping off here on that. I just want to say to you and DEC, one of my concerns from the very beginning, being on this board, was that the board would get good technical advice, good scientific advice. So I'm very, very pleased that we have the MOA with DEC, and I really appreciate your professionalism and what you're doing to help us and to help the industry and the testing sector in particular. So thank you very much. Okay, is there any other discussion on the motion to adopt?
You know, I guess, through the chair, this goes to what I mentioned this morning about public comment when the items come up on the agenda. You know, we do reach out to state agencies during this time to talk, but we don't talk to the public or the industry. So I understand what Mr. Krupe said, and not that I don't believe him. I do believe that he took those industry comments in, but I'd sure like to be able to hear from the licensees who commented, especially the testing labs, and we can't do that today. So I won't support pushing it forward, and I fully understand what you say, but I feel like you know, a bad regulation that we push forward is just as bad as not doing anything. So it's even harder to change after it's adopted. So I won't be approving this.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Shilley.
Quick question. So is it this states that the testing criteria, the compliance document that we're seeing here, it's currently dated September 30th, that's included by reference in our regulations. But does that also mean then that any time that compliance document is updated, whether the board sees it or not, it is it's still included by reference?
I believe that, well, not included by reference, included literally. The advice we received prior to your arrival, Ms. Wilson, was that we do not incorporate document title by reference. It would be document title dated so-and-so, and would in fact be almost attached to the regulations. Is that correct?
You have the choice of handling it either way. If you want to be reviewing every single manual, yes, you limit it to the one in front of you. If you trust the manual and the expertise, you say adopt it as amended. So it sounds like you've made the choice to adopt this current one, and that were there a change, there has to be a regulation change to adopt any amendment.
Okay, thanks. So, you know, let's look at it this way. This thing has been out 3 times for public comment. There are 3 bullet points in here. You know, one is allowing DEC to review the applications, which I think is the whole idea of having DEC on as a contractor. Adopting the manual from DEC, who gives the laboratories the courtesy of input in what's in there, and you know, Peak Analytical at least was very comprehensive in what they had to say, and their comments were taken into account by Mr. Krupe. And the third item is, you know, requiring changes to the standard operating procedures be approved either by the contractor, by DEC, or by us. So these are, it could be argued that the testing compliance manual sets the bar for the laboratories, which it absolutely does. But there has been, you know, plenty of opportunity for the testing laboratories themselves, the ones that are doing the work, to have input into this. So I don't think that, you know, there's a necessity for, you know, an additional testing working group to go over this. This has been gone over pretty well from the ground up, and if the testing laboratories, as this regulation is adopted, if they find that there are problems, they can come to us. They can go to Mr. Krupe and they can say, hey, look, we'd like to, you know, have you consider how we put stain on a slide, or what magnification we have to look through, or how long we have to incubate something, or, you know, whatever their concerns are. So I don't think that this regulation really, and adopting this manual is something that should be delayed. We know how important testing is. Having this manual out here is gonna lay it on the ground. Hopefully, you will be reviewing additional testing laboratory applications over the next 6 months, because we're short testing labs. If we put this off, then somebody who's thinking about going into the business is going to say, well, I guess I better wait until I see what the compliance manual actually says. That's the way I look at it. So I'm going to be supporting adopting the regulation. Are there any other discussion? Okay, not hearing any on the adoption.
Call them and send an account up over the phone. Just give them your license number.
Can we turn the phone
and have them put you in the computer.
Okay.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
Of the it's amendment, isn't it? The adoption of the amendment to 3 AAC 306-100D. Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Schulte.
No.
Mr. Jaime.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I apologize.
That's a no.
That's a no.
Okay, and I'm a yes, so it passes 3-2.
I was worried about giving.
Yeah, really, yeah. All right. Okay. We have got a couple of things here on the agenda. We have an executive session. The council we're only going to have an executive session on Top Shelf. We are not going to be discussing Common Collective Houston Gas Station in executive session. And I would entertain a motion, two-part motion. Number one, to have an executive session first with Top Shelf, and that would be with their counsel. And is your client also here? Okay, thank you. And we'll have to call her in separately. So a motion to go into executive session on license 22-150 Top Shelf Herbs of Alaska with their counsel. What's your name again, ma'am? Judith Conti.
And Ms. Conti, who are you counsel for again? Okay, and is there counsel for Top Shelf? You would be there as well.
There's two counsels. Oh, okay, all right. And with Ms. Wilson and with the director, and we need Chief Olsher on this.
I believe he's on the line.
Yeah, Chief Olsher, are you gonna want to take part in this Top Shelf discussion?
Oh.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Chief Olsher, are we going to want to dial you in on this for Top Shelf?
I can be present if there's any questions.
Top Shelf is also here.
Okay, yeah, we're going to give you another number to call, but
Also, this is Tani Zakricia. I was told that I could also participate in the executive session.
Yes, Mr. Zakricia. We're gonna your attorney and Top Shelf's attorney will contact you in a few minutes with the number to call for the executive session.
Oh, okay, great. So I will hang up on this line then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
so we'll have James in on that, and then I would also entertain a motion following this executive session to have an executive session with the director to discuss his report prior to its presentation. So if we can get a couple of motions there, the chair would entertain that. One at a time.
I motion to go into executive session for license 22150 Top Shelf Herbs.
And the justification for this is information, right? Information about people that would be prejudicial.
Correct.
Okay.
But what about the next one?
Oh, well, the next one will be a. Well, let's do this motion first. We'll come out of that executive session, then we'll go into the next one. Okay. So to go, on the motion to go into, is there a second for executive session on Top Shelf?
I'll second that. I will second that, but I have a comment.
But go ahead.
Just for efficiency's sake, if we're going to have potential for two executive sessions back to back, given that everybody's going to have to leave the room, we should clarify first exactly what we're going to do so everybody knows when to come back.
Sure. I'd probably say come back at 1. Okay, let's do this motion, and since we're not under Robert's Rules of Order, we'll do a second motion for the executive session. So all those in favor of the executive session for license 22150 Top Shelf Herbs, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, now, I'd like to have an executive session with the director, basically a pro forma executive session to discuss his report prior to its presentation to the board and the public.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
And
Yes.
again, I'm just trying to figure out which provision under the Open Meetings Act that you want one that to fall under.
This would be, we'll just say information might be prejudicial to an individual, but we don't anticipate speaking about any individuals other than the director.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Are you all right with that?
That'd be, yeah. Okay, so on that motion, it's been moved and seconded. It was moved by Mr. Schulte, and it was seconded by Mr. Jaime. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, folks, we'll see you back here about 1.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just real quickly, we did have an executive session anticipated for Common Collective and Houston Gas Station.
We're not going to have that because we will, though, have a discussion by Ms. Wilson about the Office of Administrative Hearings process for us, but we are unable to discuss that matter now with...
The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end.